Sails are the engine of a sailing boat, and like any engine they need careful preparation and tuning to get the best performance, and ultimately to get the boat moving through the water quickly. This program is aimed at helping you trim your sails in relation to the weather conditions, and therefore improve your boat speed. However, before we explain the techniques, it's a good idea to understand how a sail works and what makes it more efficient. The sails act in many ways like an aeroplane's wing. They're shaped to maximise lift and minimise drag. Different conditions demand different shapes to optimise these two parameters. In light winds, drag can actually be induced to increase the performance. So how does the sail work? When the air flows over the sail or wing, the air flowing over the curve travels further than the air on the other side, because the parted air particles have to meet at the other end. The air flowing over the curve must therefore travel faster. If not, a vacuum would exist. This faster flow creates low pressure and lift. The faster the flow, the greater the lift. On a sail going to windward, this exerts a large unwanted side force, or heeling, and a relatively small forward force. The keel helps to counteract the unwanted side force. And in the keel we can do some work, particularly in the area of the leading edge, where it's important to have a smooth and a fairer shape as possible. And some work in this will improve the boat's performance. The keel works because the heeling force makes the boat go sideways through the water, a leeward motion, and this changes the symmetrical shape of the keel into a foil which gives the boat lift and therefore an ability to go to windward. And here we have a classic example of what we don't want to see. The leading edge of this keel would break down the water flow so that the water would not attach to the leading edge of the keel. The lift wouldn't develop very well and the boat wouldn't perform to windward as well as possible. And this would apply equally to the rudder because that in itself is a lifting foil. The combination of a genoa and a mainsail helps extend these forces greater than the sum of the independent forces, and the boats that set sails as one unit will go faster. The genoa sails in a relative lift and the main in a relative header. The shape of the sail is determined by its draft and the relative position of the draft. There are many other parameters, for example, horizontal camber, twist, angle of attack, and finally the vertical camber distribution. The objective of a sailmaker is to create a fast shape that will perform well in a variety of conditions. To demonstrate a desired shape, let's take a closer look at the draft. The draft controls the power, the acceleration, and the drag. Again, we can use the comparison of an aeroplane, which in this diagram has its flaps down with the engine on full power. The aeroplane doesn't reach maximum speed, but it gets maximum lift. As the plane's speed increases, the flaps are pulled back and the maximum speed is achieved. In a sailing boat, this effect not only increases speed, but also gives better pointing ability. A deep sail is best for acceleration and therefore better immediately after attack or to power through waves. A flat sail will be faster in smooth water or when sailing at high speed. You could think of it as a deep sail as low gear and a flat sail as high gear. The position of the maximum draft is generally about 45% in mainsails and slightly forward of this at 40% in genoas. The horizontal shape, which is taken from the luff to the leach, is designed with a fair curve to promote laminar flow, which means the air flows smoothly over the surface. Beyond 50% of the chord length, the flow becomes detached and turbulent, creating drag. The fine-tuning of setting of sails is aimed at reducing this drag. As I said earlier, when both sails are in tune with each other, the combined attach flow is greater than the two individual sails can develop. Okay, here we have a Sigma 38 Genoa, which we are going to point out two specific items. First is the tailtails, which you look at when you're sailing to windward, and the second is the speed stripe, the red line here, which allows the camber of the sail
be looked at and observed. This is very important for different wind conditions where you will increase the luff tension to get the correct sail shape as the wind speed increases. As the wind speed increases and you take the tension, it pushes cloth forward, which the headstay will push back, allowing the correct shape of the sail to be developed. And this is very important to adjust for different wind conditions the relative luff tension so that the shape of the sail stays correct.
A great deal of expertise goes into making the modern sail. As you would expect, computers are used a great deal. Software has been developed over a number of years to identify what is a fast shape. Here you can see a design for a racing mainsail. We can see the flow lines which simulate what will happen for a given wind strength. Now, if we add the Genoa, we can study the combined effect. We know that the wind changes the shape of the sail, and we can build the sails to compensate. This program will show us the changes according to the wind strength. The moulded shape is the yellow line, and the red is the flying shape. We can also use the computer to identify a potential weakness. Here it's shown up in red, which indicates the area which is overstressed. So we know we have to extend the reinforcing patches higher, even before the sailmaker started the sail.
Okay, we're going to look at some different sailcloths now, all of which are the same weight, but will be used for different purposes. And we're trying to show the differences that are there and how some of them look very similar but actually have very, very different performances. We start with the classic Dacron, and we'll say that this has a strength and a durability of 100. We move to a more racing-orientated fabric where there is mylar on the outside of both sides with an internal polyester substrate. So basically both sails are made of polyester, but completely differently. This has a strength of 20% greater than the Dacron, but its length of life would probably be half. We next move along to another mylar, which will look, in fact, very similar to the Dacron, in the sense that this has Dacron on both sides of a mylar center. This has the benefits of both worlds. We get the durability of the Dacron working with the strength from the mylar, and this would be used for slightly heavier boats and cruising sails. And finally we have, for the pure out-and-out racing sails, the Kevlars which are used, where you have a woven Kevlar with a diagonal reinforcement and a mylar film on the outside. Now, I'll emphasize all these weigh exactly the same. This has at least double the strength of the Dacron and would have the same length of life.
These materials are used to help us get the desired shape, sometimes exploiting the properties of different types of material or different weights of a similar material in the same sail. Again, the computer helps us predict what is going to happen. Wind increases in velocity and changes direction with height. These characteristics must be allowed for in the design of the sail. The vertical distribution of the depth helps develop the power from this accelerated and twisted air. The other factor affecting the vertical shape of the sail is the twist, which should match the more open apparent wind angle of the stronger breeze higher up. The shape of the Genoa and the mainsail vary not only in the position of draft, as I talked about earlier, but Genoas are generally deeper than mainsails and more difficult to adjust. The great advantage of a Genoa, if you're on a keelboat like this one, is that when it's overpowered, you can change down to a smaller one. Large overlapping Genoas are designed with a flat or straight shape aft to allow the air to escape easily. This area is called the slot. Any air that interferes with the flow over the back of the main creates more drag. It's a good idea to ensure that the crew avoid sitting or standing in the slot. Therefore, as the shape of the Genoa is mainly in the forward section, efforts in trimming are concentrated in the control of the front section, using speed stripes and tail-tails. The mainsail has a more even shape throughout. The leech is very important, affecting pointing ability. helm, as well as speed. The sails have been designed and constructed to cope with a variety of conditions. So now it's up to the crew to set the sails according to the conditions of the day. If we look up from the foot of this genoa towards the top or head, we can clearly see the speed stripes. Now, if we have the foot too loose, by bringing the sheet lead forward, the leech closes up. Now, if we tighten the foot, bringing the lead aft, the leech opens up. If we put the lead in the correct position, we get the desired shape. But of course, in heavy winds, when overpowered, the sail should be flattened off and twisted off to reduce the heeling forces. But in light winds, we deliberately close the leech to create more lift. Genoas can be the most flexible source of power on board your yacht, particularly on a keelboat, because unlike the mainsail, you can easily change to a different size. So choosing the right size genoa, or knowing when to change up or down, is important. Your sailmaker will help you on this. After that, only with experience on the water will you know exactly when to change. The objective when trimming the genoa is to maintain the right draft position with the correct angle to the wind. When going upwind, there is a trade-off between the speed and pointing ability. The genoa is controlled by the halyard, the sheet, the fair lead position, and the forestay tension.
Now we come to setting the genoa, and the most important is to get the halyard tension correct. And most people would put far too much tension. It's far better to have less tension on the luff so that you in fact get some wrinkling coming from the front of the sail, and then fine-tune this after the sail has been set. Your next control is to have the car position in the correct place, and for this you take a point approximately 50% of the luff length of the sail down through the clew, and this will give you your initial point for the genoa car. We then put the boat into the direction we want to sail and trim in on the sheet to have the sail looking and trimmed correctly. We then need to fine-tune the position of the car, and we do this by looking at the tails on the luff of the sail and ensuring that they break evenly on the top and at the bottom. If the telltale at the top is breaking before the telltale at the bottom, we move the car forward, and inversely if we move the car aft when the telltale at the bottom breaks before the one at the top. I emphasize again that it's important that the two telltales break at the same time. We now need to look at the shape of the sail, and we want to have a nice smooth aerofoil on our speed stripe, and we balance this with the halyard tension and the amount of sheet that we have. The sheet controls the twist and the halyard controls the position of the depth of flow, and by working with these two we can achieve the correct shape. One of the best ways to look at a sail is to move forward to the middle of the foot and look up and aft. From here you can look up and see the shape of the sail with the speed stripes and the twist of the sail, and also the slot, the interaction between the genoa and the leeward side of the mainsail. The next control that comes into play is to ensure that the forestay is as straight as possible, or is as straight as we require it for the wind conditions in which we're sailing. And we see here the different effects that we can achieve by having the forestay tight or the forestay loose. We can then balance the amount of sag that we're getting in the forestay with the halyard tension and the sheet lead to produce a variety of different sail shapes. Okay, we want to look now at the shape of the Genoas for different conditions. If we're sailing in flat water, we can sail with a sail which is less deep in camber, and we can sheet it a little harder. This is because the boat requires less power in order to make its way through the waves. If we're sailing in choppy conditions, you want the maximum of power from the sail in order for the boat to punch through the waves. And to do this, you will deepen the sail and take a little more halyard tension to make the luff a little rounder. This makes it a lot easier for the helmsman as well to sail the boat in a nice steady course. This is classically called sailing in the groove, and is in fact one of the prime objectives in setting your sails, is to trim them that the boat will sail in a nice groove. It will tend to sail itself. You shouldn't be adjusting everything all of the time. You should try and achieve a balance from the sails that the boat will sail itself. Here we are sailing with the #1 Genoa, and it's at the top of its range, and we've hoisted the sail with the minimum amount of luff tension, and you can see by the creases coming off the luff that more tension is required. So Chris, could you put some more tension on? And I use the Genoa sheet here so that the pressure is balanced. That's good. And then wind the sail back in. Okay, we're sailing along here now, and the boat is overpowered, so we need to depower the Genoa, and we do this by moving the sheet lead aft, and this will open the slot and hopefully make it a little easier. And now we can see that the slot has opened up quite a lot. We can sheet the sail on. The boat is a little easier to sail, and the speed can come back. It's very important to have the correct leech line tension. You don't want to have too slacker leech line so the sail's flogging like now, and you don't want to have too much leech line so that the sail hooks at the back end. You just want to take sufficient tension so that the sail quietens down. And the same rules apply to the leech of the mainsail. We're sailing along and the breeze dies and we need to power up the sail, and so we ease the backstay, and this deepens the camber in the upper part of the sail.
The objective of controlling and trimming the mainsail is the same as any other sail, and that is to maintain the correct position of draft with the correct angle to the wind. The mainsail is more controllable than a Genoa, since the mast can bend, the boom has an outhaul, a kicking strap, a main sheet, and a traveller, and of course you can reef a mainsail. When going upwind, as with the Genoa, we need to balance pointing ability and speed from the sail. In flat water, we sheet in and use a flatter shape. In a seaway, we need more power from the shape of the sail.
Okay, we're going to start today with setting up the mainsail, and the first control we're going to work with is the main halyard, and you need to take the top of the sail up to the black band on the mast. And for the second control we have the outhaul, and again you set the sail out to the black band. The next control is the vang, which we use to control the twist in the sail. That looks about right. Okay, now we have the final control, which is major control, which is the main sheet, which we use to set the sail to the wind. And right at the end we have two fine controls for adjusting the balance of the boat when we're sailing along. The first is the traveller, and secondly we have the Cunningham for the fine tuning of the shape of the sail. Okay, that goes through the prime controls. Now we'll settle down and set the mainsail up properly to get the boat to go as fast as possible. Move across here and have a good look at the sail and make sure everything's working right. And I see that there's a little bit too much weather helm. We just ease it down the track a little bit to let the helm ease off a bit and the boat speed accelerate. And then a little more main sheet. And we work through both of these two in order to gradually fine-tune the speed to be as fast as possible and the boat to go as high as possible. Just working at this traveller all the time. As soon as I see the boat speed drop, I use the traveller down. As the helmsman bear away and accelerate. As the boat speed comes up, bring the traveller back up. Let the helmsman point the boat as high as possible. We have some other controls on the mainsail which we can help create boat speed with the shape of the sail. We have the foot outhaul and the luff Cunningham. At the present moment, if we look at the shape of the sail, the flow is a little bit too far aft and we need to take some Cunningham in order to be able to bring the flow a little further forward, and this will help us go fast. As I take on the Cunningham, I concentrate on the speed stripe in the middle of the sail to look at the way the flow moves as the Cunningham comes on. You can see that the flow has moved forward here, and we need now to take a little main sheet in order to get the shape of the sail to be correct. Alright, the top tail is stalled out here, so I just ease the traveller down until it starts to fly, and this should give us the maximum speed. Now the top tail is flying really well here. It just stalls and then flies again, just stalls and flies again. We've got the highest boat speed of the day so far. Okay, now we've set the main sheet, and we'll settle down to just trimming with the traveller to just fine-tune getting the maximum speed from the boat. As the helm builds up, we'll just ease the traveller down slightly. Boat's not accelerating, we'll ease it a little more. Let the helmsman bear away, develop a bit more speed. Now the speed's come up, we can just bring the traveller back up so that he can point as high as possible. Easing it out again so that he can accelerate. As the boat accelerates, we gradually pull it back in again to let the boat point as high as possible. And as I'm doing this, I'm watching the tails as well. I want this top tail to be just stalling and flying, stalling and flying. At the moment it's stalling a little too much, so I just ease the traveller again. And I'm working in a combination of watching the helm, watching the boat speed, and the tail to try and make the boat go as fast as possible. It's this constant fine-tuning that lets us keep an extra 1/10 or 2/10 on the boat speed here. In developing this sailing in the groove, it's important to understand that both sails in fact do work together and do interact with each other. And it's the working of the two sails together that enables the boat to sail faster and easier. If you over-trim the headsail, the boat will tend to bear away. If you over-trim the mainsail, the boat will tend to luff up. And therefore, balancing the two and setting them correctly will just enable the boat to sail more easily in a straight line. You will need to use less helm, therefore less drag, and the boat will go faster. Practicing to set the boat up in the groove, we've adjusted the sails and trimmed them and made the boat perform as best we can. At this time it's quite a good idea to make some notes of exactly what's happened. And to make this easy, it's good to have marks on the halyard, on the car position and the sheets, so that you can reproduce the conditions another time. For different conditions you'll have a different set of notes, and therefore you can go into a race and be sailing along and say, okay, we've already tried this, look up your notes and reset everything up to good boat speeds that you found before. Okay, we're going to bear away now and put up a spinnaker. Seize everything out. Seize the luff Cunningham. And seize the foot out haul, Chris, please. That's good. Okay. As you bear away onto a run, it's very important to release the tension in the backstay, to straighten the mast and to put the rig over the bow. This helps the shape of the sail and the balance of the boat when going downwind.
We've talked a lot about going upwind. Let's now look at sailing downwind. Many people take far too relaxed an attitude to this point of sailing. A spinnaker is used both for running and reaching, and so we need to alter the shape as well as the trim to get the best performance. To do this, we have the sheet, the guy, and the height of the spinnaker pole. As with other sails, we need to control the draft position of the spinnaker, which is most efficient at 50%.
Okay, we've got the spinnaker set now, and the problem we have is that the pole is not set correctly. The outboard end is too low. And this is shown by several characteristics. The first being that the centerfold of the spinnaker is not in a vertical plane, it's angled out to windward. And the second is that the leading edge of the spinnaker, when it does collapse, goes in one very slow, large collapse, which makes it very difficult for the people to trim, and when it does collapse, it's in one big bang. Okay, we should now try raising the pole and lift the outboard end up about 18 inches. Okay, that's good. Just ease the sheet a little here, Chris. Now we've got the spinnaker setting quite well here. The edge has got some movement in it. The center is vertical, but it's quite stable. The leading edge just curling and flicking. And we're aiming for the curl to be just above the main blue panel here on the edge of the sail. As you can see, the curl is quite different. It flicks in and flicks out again on its own accord. And we'll just show the effect if the pole is too high. And the points to look for is the creasing coming out of the head of the sail, vertical creasing out of the head of the sail, and quite a different characteristic with the leech. Okay, as you can see, the spinnaker is very unstable in this situation, and what we need to do is bring it back down again to stabilize it. Keep going, Chris. Now we've got a situation where the centerfold is nice and vertical, the leading edge has settled down, it's much easier to steer the boat to. The leading edge will fold in and roll back out again in a nice easy motion. Okay, one of the biggest areas of discussion on a boat is the spinnaker pole height. We've described the principle of having the outboard end to create the correct effect on the luff of the spinnaker. The next thing we must concentrate on is to ensure that the pole is set at 90 degrees to the mast so that we can project the greatest area possible. So can you put it up, Chris, please? And we'll tell you when it's square. A little more? That's good. Now we've got the pole set very clearly at projecting the spinnaker as much as possible.
The other part of trimming a spinnaker is that the pole should be at right angles to the wind at all times, and this will ensure the correct shape of the sail as well as projecting the maximum sail area to the wind. If the pole is too far aft, the sheet will be too tight and eventually collapse the sail. If too far forward for the wind, the head will be too full and the spinnaker will roll from side to side. Then you bring the pole back to flatten the sail, which will reduce the heeling forces as well as make it more efficient.
Okay, one of the useful tricks to remember is that when you run in strong winds, the boat oscillates quite a lot, and by moving the sheet lead from the normal position onto the guy, and you use the lazy guy as the sheet, this stabilizes the clew and allows the boat to be sailed a lot more easily in these conditions. Okay, now we've looked at the different pole settings, and we can see the characteristics that we're trying to get from the luff of the spinnaker to make it easy to sail with. It's important to understand there are quite a lot of different types of spinnaker, and you can get spinnakers which are cut specially for reaching or specially for running, or you can have one which is an all-purpose spinnaker which will work through a wide range and be nice and easy to sail with. And there is a new option that's become very popular nowadays, which is an asymmetric spinnaker, a jenica, which allows the sail to be flown without a pole when you're reaching or flown off the pole when you're running. And this is a one-sided sail and actually performs very efficiently. It's partly caused because of the fact that spinnakers developed because of the handicap rule, saying they had to be equal on both sides. The cruising spinnaker or jenica has been developed without any rules, and therefore handling characteristics and speed have been able to be developed without the restrictions of the rule.
Well, this program, I hope, has given you an insight to the very complex world of sail handling and trimming. Perhaps the best advice is to spend time on board your boat with your crew, experimenting with these different techniques, using boat speed and other boats as your benchmark. Then hopefully you can find yourself climbing up the fleet. Good sailing.